Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into elections today, but not the usual how to vote stuff.
No, not at all.
We've got some really interesting material from someone who's right in the middle of it all.
A real election insider.
Yeah. And they've got some strong opinions about how things work, what needs to change, and even where elections might go in the future.
It's that inside perspective that makes this so fascinating. We're not just talking theory.
Exactly. We're getting a look at the hopes and the frustrations of someone who really sees how elections affect our lives.
And one of the things that jumps out is their concern about money in elections.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
how could you not be worried about how big money can just kind of distort the whole process?
Right. They talk about how it creates this uneven playing field. Some voices get amplified way more than others simply because they have the cash.
Yeah, it's like trying to have a conversation at a rock concert. Good luck getting your point across. They even bring up the Fair Elections Now Act as a potential way to address this.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
I think most people would agree that a truly democratic system should be about the strength of your ideas.
Not the size of your bank account.
Exactly. And this idea of fairness, it carries over into their next point, which is, I have to admit, I've never really thought about this before. The idea of sportsmanship in elections.
Okay, now I'm picturing candidates shaking hands at the end of a debate.
I know, right? It sounds funny, but they're not talking about literal sports. It's more about how elections should be like a contest of ideas.
A fair fight.
Yeah, where everyone plays by the rules. They even compare it to the Lincoln-Douglas debates, which were known for reasoned arguments, where you actually respect your opponent.
Less mudslinging and more substance.
Exactly. So less about attacking your opponent and more about persuading people with your vision.
Right, and they argue that resorting to personal attacks or spreading misinformation, that's like cheating in a game. It undermines the whole process.
Makes you wonder, though, could this electoral sportsmanship idea actually work on a bigger scale, like in international relations?
Now that's a thought-provoking question. Could countries settle disputes through persuasive arguments instead of going to war?
I mean, I know it sounds a bit idealistic, but
But it's an interesting idea. And this emphasis on fairness and playing by the rules, it ties into their views on leadership, too.
oh yeah, they're really strong on this point that effective leaders need to have a proven track record in public service.
Like you can't just show up with charisma and big ideas, you need to have actually done the work.
Yeah, they want someone who's been in the trenches, who understands how to get things done in the real world.
They even mentioned the Volcker Rule, which was a pretty complex financial reform after the 2008 crisis.
Right. And they argue that someone without deep knowledge of financial systems, they wouldn't have been able to pull that off.
So experience matters.
Okay, but does that mean everyone has to climb the traditional political ladder to be considered a leader?
That's a great question. I'm not sure they directly address that, but their focus on public service suggests they'd be looking for evidence of someone who can navigate complex systems and someone who can stand up to undue influence.
Someone who can handle the pressure.
Exactly. So it's not just about holding a fancy title. It's about proving you have the skills and integrity to lead effectively.
This leads us to a topic that's at the heart of every election: voting. Our source has some interesting, maybe even contradictory feelings about this.
Yeah, it's like they feel this powerful sense of connection when they vote, like they're part of something bigger.
But at the same time, there's this frustration, too.
A real sense of disillusionment. And I think a lot of that stems from their experience with the Electoral College.
Ah, yes, the Electoral College.
Yeah.
The system that's supposed to be about representing states, but sometimes ends up feeling more like it's about math than people.
Yeah, it's definitely a sore point for them. They actually call it a relic of the past that doesn't really reflect how our country works today.
And they don't just complain about it either. They propose a pretty radical solution: switching to a pure popular vote system.
A big change. But their argument is that in a true democracy, shouldn't the person with the most votes win? Period.
Right. But then they go on to say something even more surprising. Even with a popular vote system, they think we'd still be missing something crucial.
Like what?
They bring up the issue of election deniers and how deeply that worries them. It's not just about counting the votes correctly. It's about this deeper erosion of trust in the whole system.
So even if we fix the mechanics of voting,
There's still this problem of people just not believing in the results.
yeah,
And that's scary when you think about it.
it is. And that's where their thinking takes a really interesting turn. They suggest that maybe technology, specifically artificial intelligence, could be part of the solution.
Okay, now we're getting futuristic.
Right. AI and elections.
I'm intrigued, but also a little nervous.
I get it, it's new territory. But the way our source talks about it, it's not about AI replacing human judgment or anything like that.
So how do they see AI fitting into this?
They seem to be thinking of it as a tool to gather and process public opinion in a much more sophisticated way. They actually reference the Pew Research Center. You know how they use data to understand societal trends?
Mm.
Well, they think AI could take that to a whole new level, give us a much deeper understanding of what people really think about the issues.
That's pretty wild when you think about it. It's like having this incredibly powerful tool to tap into the collective consciousness of the country.
Right.
But wouldn't that be incredibly complex even with AI? People's opinions are shaped by so many things. It's almost like trying to predict the weather.
You're right, it is complex.
Yeah.
And our source acknowledges that.
Yeah.
Even with AI, figuring out human behavior, especially when it comes to something as important as voting, it's a huge challenge.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
I am hooked on this deep dive. I can't wait to hear more.
Welcome back. It's amazing how much insight this one person has, right? It really makes you think about elections in a whole new way.
For sure. And something they said about how candidates connect with voters, that really stuck with me. It's not just about the facts and figures, it's about emotions too.
It's about those deeper beliefs we all have. Like
Yeah.
they're saying we're not robots.
Exact.
We vote with our hearts as much as our heads.
That's so true.
And that's why they bring up this concept of framing.
Framing.
Yeah, that they actually mentioned George Lakoff's work on how language, how the way things are worded can subtly influence how people see an issue.
Ooh, that's interesting. It's like the whole spin doctor thing.
Hmm.
But they're talking about appealing to people's values, not just trying to manipulate them.
Right. And they seem to think that the most effective leaders, they're the ones who can connect with voters on a deeper level. Like they even use the example of Franklin D. Roosevelt, how he inspired hope during the Great
It
Depression.
wasn't just about his policies, was it?
No, it was about connecting with the emotional needs of the country at that time.
That makes a lot of sense. People want to believe in something, to feel like someone understands what they're going through.
Exactly. And that actually ties back to their earlier point about experience in public service. They seem to think that having that real-world experience, it helps you understand what people are going through.
Helps you connect with them on that emotional level.
Right. It's not just about having a degree or giving a good speech. It's about having empathy, being able to relate to everyday struggles.
I see what they're saying. And it makes their point about choosing issues even more interesting. Remember how they put it?
What kind of America do I want to live in?
Simple, but powerful.
So straightforward. They're basically saying, don't get bogged down in every single policy debate. Just think about the big picture. Like, what kind of world do you want to create with your vote?
Yeah, that really gets you thinking about your values, what really matters to you.
Exactly. And what kind of future do you want to be a part of?
And that's a question we should be asking ourselves all the time, not just during elections.
Absolutely. And, this brings us back to those concerns about money in politics. If we aren't clear about our own values, if we aren't paying attention to the big picture,
It's easier for the people with all the money to just kind of push their own agenda right, even if it's not what most people want.
it's like they're saying that being informed, being an engaged citizen, that's our best defense against manipulation.
Right. We can't just sit back and consume whatever information is thrown at us. We have to be critical thinkers, we have to do our own research, and most importantly, we have to vote.
Exactly. And this leads to their final prediction, which is actually pretty optimistic. They think voter turnout is going to increase in the future.
They seem pretty convinced about that. It's like they see this coming wave of civic engagement.
Yeah.
They even compare it to the growth of the internet.
Oh,
Well, they say, just like the internet changed how we communicate and get information, this new wave is going to transform how we participate in our democracy.
A bold statement for sure.
Yeah. And they know there are challenges like apathy, misinformation, and just barriers to access. All that can make people less enthusiastic about voting.
Right, but they also point out that we're living in a more interconnected world. People are more aware of the issues and they have more ways to make their voices heard.
It's like that saying, think globally, act locally.
Exactly. They actually mention the Arab Spring uprisings and how social media played a role in mobilizing people.
That's true.
So maybe that same energy can help revitalize democracy here, too.
I'm seeing a pattern here. It's not just about the numbers, it's about people actually feeling empowered.
Right, feeling like they can make a difference.
And maybe technology, if we use it the right way, can actually help break down those barriers and create a more inclusive democracy. This has really got me thinking about the power of technology in a whole new way.
It's not just about gadgets and having fun, it's about connecting with people, giving them the tools to shape their own future.
Wow, that is powerful. It's like we're not just watching the election process happen, we're all active participants, and every single vote matters.
Okay, I'm feeling pretty inspired right now, but let's not forget about those concerns about money and politics.
Right, we can't just ignore that and hope for the best.
So, for our final segment, let's dive back into that issue. What can we do, individually and together, to make things more fair and equitable so that everyone's voice can be heard?
Okay, we're back for our final segment, and I've got to say, this conversation has really got me thinking. We've covered so much ground. You know the power of money, how important experience is, even AI shaking things up. But it all comes back to how do we make sure elections are fair? Like,
Yeah.
truly representative.
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question, right? And our source, they really wrestle with that throughout this material. They get the challenges, but they haven't lost hope. And that's inspiring.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're pushing us to go beyond just fixing the obvious problems. Like, yeah, campaign finance, voter access, those are huge. But what about some bigger, more creative solutions?
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, they bring up this idea of citizens' assemblies. Basically, you randomly select a group of citizens, kind of like jury duty, but for democracy, and they really dive deep into a specific issue. And then they make recommendations.
Oh.
They even point to Ireland, where it's been used to tackle some really tough topics,
Like what?
like abortion, same-sex marriage, big stuff.
So it's like taking direct democracy to a whole new level.
Right.
But is that even possible on a larger scale?
There are definitely some logistical hurdles, for sure, but the idea itself, that's what's so interesting. Our source seems to think that getting everyday people involved, not just politicians and experts, that could help break through all the partisan gridlock.
So you're saying that sometimes the best solutions come from just getting a diverse group of people together,
Just letting them talk it out, figure things out.
like a giant brainstorming session for the whole country. I kind of like it.
And this idea of, everyone working together, it really connects to their point about bridging the gap between facts and emotions. Remember how we were talking about that earlier?
Oh yeah, how voters are swayed by logic, but also by their feelings.
Right. Well, they think we need to find a way to respect both. They actually use this really interesting metaphor. Imagine a bridge, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
One side is all about hard facts, evidence, data.
Got it.
And the other side is made up of the stories and experiences that connect us emotionally.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it makes total sense. If we just focus on the cold, hard facts, we miss that human connection. The things that make us actually care enough to act.
Right. But on the flip side, if we're only led by emotion, well, we can be easily misled. We might end up making decisions that aren't good for us in the long run.
It's about finding that balance.
That sweet spot where we're informed by the facts, yes, but also driven by a shared sense of purpose.
A vision for the future we can all believe in. I love that. It's like we need both our heads and our hearts to create a truly just and equitable society.
And their final message really drives that home. Building a better future isn't just about changing election rules. It's so much bigger than that. They even quote Margaret Mead, the anthropologist. She said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has."
Wow, that's incredible. It's like they're giving us this call to action. We all have the power to make a difference, not just with our vote, but with how we live our lives every day.
The choices we make, how we treat each other, it all adds up.
That's what this whole deep dive has been about, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding elections. It's about understanding our own role in shaping the world we want to live in.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an incredible journey, and thank you for guiding us through all this material.
The pleasure was all mine. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked some new ideas and inspired you to really engage with our democracy. Because the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create together.